That night started like every other quiet evening on Earth. Most people were asleep. Roads were mostly empty, and the world was calm in its usual way. But far above the clouds, something unusual was already happening, something no one on Earth had expected, and something that would soon change how humanity saw itself. High in the sky, a strange light appeared. At first, it looked like just another shooting star, the kind people make wishes on before bedtime. But this light didn't move like a normal falling star. It slowed down, then brightened, then changed its direction slightly, as though controlled by something intelligent. A few people who were awake at that hour noticed it from their windows. Some thought it might be a satellite. Others assumed it was an airplane reflecting light. No one imagined it was a ship from another world. As the object moved lower, alarms started to go off in a distant monitoring station. A group of night shift workers, who were used to long silent hours, suddenly found themselves staring at a screen showing a fast-moving object entering the atmosphere. "What is that?" one of them whispered, leaning closer. No one had an answer. All they knew was that the object was not following any known flight path. It wasn't listed in any database. It wasn't responding to radio calls. And whatever it was coming in fast. The object pushed through the sky, leaving a faint trail of glowing mist behind it. The closer it came to the ground, the more obvious it became that it wasn't shaped like any aircraft Earth had built. It wasn't sharp like a jet, or wide like a plane. It had a round, uneven shape, almost like it had been damaged or dented long before reaching Earth. Finally, with a long, echoing rumble, the object landed in a remote field far from any big city. Dust and bits of dry grass rose into the air as the ship slid to a stop. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It simply sat there silent, motionless, and completely unfamiliar. The first people to arrive were local security teams who lived nearby. They were told only one thing: something had crashed and no one knew what it was. When they saw the object from a distance, they stopped walking. None of them had ever seen anything like it. The surface looked cracked, covered with faint marks, as though it had traveled through storms far more powerful than anything on Earth. As they cautiously walked closer, a few scientists and observers arrived too, having been alerted by the monitoring station. Their steps were slow and careful. No one knew if the object was dangerous, or if someone or something was inside it. They didn't raise any weapons, though. They had been ordered not to. The goal was to understand, not to frighten or harm whatever had landed. Everyone stood in a loose circle around the vessel, waiting, listening. The night was cold and strangely quiet. Even the insects in the field seemed to have gone silent, as if nature itself was observing the moment. Then the ship made a sound. It wasn't loud, more like a soft hum, as if something inside was waking up. A few of the people watching stepped back, but no one ran. Curiosity held them in place. A small section of the craft slowly lifted, revealing a dark opening. Out of the shadows came a dim blue light. It flickered softly at first, then grew brighter. The humans watching braced themselves, unsure what they were about to see. And then they saw movement. At first, it was just a shape, thin, tired, unsteady. Then another shape appeared. Then another. A small group was stepping out of the ship, moving slowly, like people who had been traveling for far too long. Their bodies were nothing like human bodies, but they didn't seem threatening. Their movements were weak, almost trembling, as though they had barely enough strength to stand. The humans watching them didn't speak. The visitors didn't speak either. They simply looked around with wide, uneasy eyes, taking in their surroundings, the sky, the people, everything. They appeared frightened, but relieved at the same time, as though they had finally reached a place they hoped might be safe, but they were not sure. A communication specialist stepped forward. He kept his hands visible and open, hoping the visitors would understand the gesture. He spoke in a calm, steady voice, knowing full well they wouldn't understand his language. But tone mattered more than words. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe here." The visitors watched him carefully. They seemed confused, but also curious. One of them made a small gesture, something like lifting its arm halfway. It wasn't an attack. It looked more like an attempt to communicate. The gesture was slow, unsure, like someone who isn't certain how to ask for help. The specialist took a slow step forward, then stopped. He didn't want to frighten them. Everyone around him stayed still, trying their best to create an atmosphere that felt calm, not hostile. One of the scientists noticed something important. The visitor's skin, or whatever covered them, was slightly dim, as if their bodies struggled to maintain energy. They looked exhausted. Their eyes, large and reflective, carried a kind of sadness that made everyone feel unexpectedly concerned for them. Not another scientist whispered. They looked scared. Not dangerous, just scared. That changed the mood instantly. People had expected something unknown, maybe even something aggressive. But seeing fear on the faces of these visitors made everyone realize something simple yet powerful. These were not invaders. They were travelers who had seen far too much hardship. One of the visitors tried to take a step forward, but stumbled. Before anyone could react, another visitor gently supported them, showing a quiet sense of care among themselves. It was such a familiar gesture, one living being supporting another in need, that it made the humans watching feel an unexpected connection. The observers and security teams exchanged silent glances. If the visitors had come with harmful intentions, they wouldn't be stepping out like this, weak, trembling, struggling to stand. They would have come out strong, prepared. But everything about them showed the opposite. As more experts arrived, they began examining the ship from a safe distance. They noticed the outer surface was burnt in places, with cracks running across different sections. Whatever journey these beings had taken, it had clearly pushed their vessel beyond its limits. One engineer quietly said, "This ship wasn't meant to land here. It looks like it barely survived whatever happened out there." A communication device was brought forward, something simple that displayed shapes and colors. The idea was to create a basic system to exchange signals. The visitors watched the patterns on the device curiously, then attempted to respond by touching symbols on their own small panel they had carried from the ship. For the first time, both sides knew they had a way to start communicating. Little by little, one thing became clear. The visitors hadn't chosen Earth intentionally. Their navigation systems were damaged. Their route had been changed by something unexpected somewhere in space. They ended up here by mistake, tired, lost, and in need of help. But even though the humans had this growing understanding, a new challenge rose silently in the background. Not everyone in the region knew what had happened yet. Word would eventually spread. The world would eventually find out that beings from another place had arrived. And once that happened, people would react differently, some with curiosity, some with fear, and some with confusion. For now, though, the first small group of humans simply stood with the unexpected visitors under the quiet night sky. This moment was fragile, precious, and unlike anything Earth had ever experienced. No one knew what would happen next. But one thing was already clear to those who stood there watching. The beings who had arrived were not a threat. They were refugees, lost travelers who had come to Earth not with power, but with hope. And on this silent night, humanity faced its first choice. Protect them or fear them. No decision had been made yet. But the people at that field were already beginning to understand something important. Sometimes compassion is the first step toward peace, even when the world changes in the most unexpected ways. It was only the beginning. The first night passed quietly, though no one truly slept. Humans stayed close to the visitors' landing site, watching over them while trying to understand what had brought them to Earth. The visitors rested in the shade of their damaged ship, huddled together for comfort. Even though they were exhausted, their eyes remained alert, always scanning the surroundings, as if expecting danger at any moment. The next morning, a small team of scientists and linguists arrived with equipment to try and communicate more effectively. They wanted to know who these beings were, why they were here, and if they needed help. The visitors were cautious at first, keeping a little distance. But the humans spoke in soft voices, moved slowly, and used gentle gestures to show they meant no harm at first. Communication was slow and difficult. The visitors didn't speak in words humans could understand. Instead, they used sounds, lights, and small movements. Their hands or whatever resembled hands moved in patterns that seemed meaningful, but no one could interpret them immediately. It was frustrating for both sides. Humans wanted to know more, and the visitors seemed desperate to tell their story, but no shared language existed. One of the scientists decided to try a visual approach. She drew simple pictures on a digital tablet: stars, planets, a small ship, a home. She showed them to the visitors one by one. Slowly, their expressions began to change. First there was confusion, then recognition, and finally a small flicker of hope. The visitors pointed at the images, then at themselves, trying to connect the drawings with their own lives. It was clear now that they were trying to explain something important. Over the next few hours, more of their story emerged. The visitors had come from a system of planets far away. Their home world had been destroyed in a natural disaster, a star that had become unstable and consumed part of their planet. They had survived by boarding their small vessel, hoping to find a safe place to live. Their journey had been long and full of dangers, and their ship had only survived by luck. Earth had not been their intended destination. It had been a mistake, caused by damaged navigation systems and a malfunctioning autopilot. The humans listened carefully, trying to understand not just the facts, but the emotions behind them. These beings had lost everything: their homes, friends, and communities, and were now traveling through space with nothing but the hope of survival. The scientists could see the exhaustion in their bodies and the fear in their eyes, and it made them feel an unexpected bond. These were not creatures of war or destruction. They were refugees, just like humans in times of crisis, seeking safety wherever they could find it. As the day passed, the humans provided food and water, small gestures that the visitors seemed to appreciate but did not fully understand. They had never experienced such kindness from strangers before. Slowly, one of the younger visitors tentatively approached a human, holding out a small, glowing object. It was clearly something valuable to them, perhaps a personal belonging or a part of their technology. The human accepted it with care, nodding to show it was safe. This small exchange built trust. It was the first real connection between two very different species. While communication was growing, the scientists and engineers began inspecting the damaged ship. They carefully examined the propulsion system, the navigation equipment, and the life support mechanisms. It was clear that the vessel had been through an incredibly harsh journey. Systems that were meant to keep the crew safe and comfortable had been pushed to the limit. The humans realized that repairing the ship completely would take time and resources, but for now, keeping the visitors alive and calm was the priority. One of the engineers suggested creating a temporary shelter nearby, a place where the visitors could rest safely while repairs were underway. The humans built a small structure with soft surfaces, light, and warmth, things the visitors seemed to need but couldn't provide for themselves. When they were invited to enter, the visitors hesitated for a moment, unsure if they could trust this new environment. But curiosity and exhaustion won over fear. Slowly they entered, touching the walls and floor gently as if testing every surface. They looked relieved to find that it was safe, and the humans quietly watched, knowing that every small step mattered. As the days went on, The visitors began to relax, though only slightly. They had survived a long journey, and trust did not come easily. But they began to show small signs of their personalities, curiosity, playfulness, and even a kind of humor in the way they interacted with each other. The humans found this endearing and started to learn from them as much as the visitors learned from humans. Simple gestures, a nod, a smile, a hand reaching out, became the foundation of communication. Slowly, a bridge formed between two worlds. Meanwhile, the visitors tried to explain the hardships they had faced during their journey. Using a combination of gestures and images, they showed their planet being consumed by fire and chaos, people and communities being separated, and their desperate escape through the darkness of space. The humans watched with compassion. Even though they couldn't fully understand every detail, they felt the fear, loss, and determination the visitors had experienced. It was a story of survival, resilience, and the will to live against all odds. One scientist noticed something remarkable. When the visitors were shown images of Earth, green forests, flowing rivers, animals, they reacted with wonder. Some even approached the screens, touching the images as if trying to feel the world. It was clear that Earth represented something more than just safety. It represented a chance to start over. The humans could see the spark of hope returning to these beings who had been through so much darkness. Food became another important step in building trust. The visitors were hesitant at first, unsure what was safe to eat. The humans offered simple, non-threatening meals, fresh fruits, soft bread, and water. Slowly, the visitors began to eat, carefully at first, then with more confidence. Eating together created a bond that words could not express. It was a small but significant moment, humans providing sustenance, visitors learning to trust, both sides recognizing a shared connection dot as trust grew. The visitors began to show signs of creativity and intelligence. They pointed to objects around the humans' camp and made sounds that seemed like questions. They watched carefully, trying to understand not just the tools, but the way humans use them. The humans responded patiently, demonstrating, explaining, and showing. Each interaction was slow, but every small success felt like a victory. Both sides were learning, adapting, and understanding that cooperation was the only way forward. By the end of the second day, the humans had a better understanding of the visitors' culture and needs. They realized that these beings were not only intelligent, but deeply social. They thrived when together, helping one another, and became anxious when separated. The humans respected this instinct, keeping the group together and making sure no one was left alone. In doing so, they discovered something powerful about compassion. It was not just about providing food and shelter, but also about respecting the emotional and social needs of another being. Toward evening, the humans introduced a basic communication device that allowed the visitors to select simple icons representing food, water, rest, or questions. The visitors learned quickly, using the device to express their needs and respond to human gestures. It was slow at first, but over time, the interactions became more fluid. They could ask for help, express gratitude, or indicate curiosity. For the first time, a true dialogue began, bridging the gap between worlds. Even with progress, moments of fear and uncertainty remained. The visitors occasionally froze at loud noises or sudden movements, a reminder that their journey had been traumatic. Humans remained patient, understanding that trust could not be rushed. They moved carefully, spoke softly, and respected the visitor's space. Each day, the bond strengthened, proving that empathy and patience could overcome even the deepest fear. By the third day, the visitors had begun to share more of their story. Through gestures, drawings, and the communication device, they explained that their world had been full of families, friends, and communities before disaster struck. They had left behind everything they knew, hoping to find safety somewhere. Earth, even by accident, had become that place. The humans listened with care, imagining the courage it took to travel through the unknown, facing fear and loss, all for the hope of survival. The humans also started to reflect on themselves. Watching the visitors, they realized how often fear and misunderstanding could divide people on Earth. And yet, here they were, standing together with beings from another world, learning that compassion could overcome fear. It was a lesson about humanity itself, that the instinct to protect, to understand, and to care could reach beyond borders, species, and worlds. By the end of the day, the visitors were still cautious, but more comfortable. They moved around the shelter without fear, ate with more confidence, and even responded to human gestures with small smiles or gentle touches. They were still refugees, lost and far from home. But the humans had given them something vital, a sense of safety, hope, and the beginning of trust. As night fell, the humans watched them resting in the soft shelter, thinking about what tomorrow would bring. There was still so much to do: repairing the ship, establishing better communication, and as word of the visitors' arrival slowly spread, the world began to react. At first, news traveled through small channels, with only local reporters and online watchers noticing the strange craft in the remote field. Social media exploded with blurry photos and speculation. Some people were amazed and excited, imagining what it could mean for humanity. Others were afraid, worried that these strangers could bring unknown dangers. The debate was everywhere, from private conversations to public forums, and it reached the highest levels of government in every country. Leaders of nations began calling emergency meetings. Some officials were cautious, insisting that the visitors could be a threat until proven otherwise. They worried that the newcomers might have technologies humans didn't understand, or that they could bring diseases or secrets humans were unprepared for. Security advisors suggested isolating the visitors entirely and keeping them under strict surveillance. The idea of fear and control was tempting to many, because humanity had often reacted this way to the unknown, but there were others who argued differently. Scientists, educators, and humanitarian groups spoke out, emphasizing that the visitors showed no signs of aggression. They were clearly exhausted, confused, and in need of care. They had come by mistake, not by plan. Every gesture they made, every weak step they took, showed desperation and vulnerability. These voices reminded leaders that compassion could guide the world in a way fear never could. Back at the landing site, the humans working with the visitors noticed the change in atmosphere. Suddenly, they were not just helping the small group. They were under observation themselves. Drones flew above, and cameras were set up at safe distances to monitor interactions. People were cautious, but the visitors didn't seem to notice or care much about the attention. They were focused on something more immediate: the humans who had been helping them, offering food, shelter, and patience. Despite the scrutiny, the visitors began showing more of their personalities. One of the younger beings, who had been shy and hesitant before, started exploring the surroundings of the shelter. It touched the soft walls, the grass, and even the small water containers set out for them. Another visitor, older and more careful, watched over the younger ones, guiding them back when they wandered too far. Observing them, humans began to understand that these beings were deeply social, caring for each other in ways that reflected strong family bonds. The communication device proved essential during this time. Visitors were learning quickly to express basic needs, but more importantly, they began to communicate emotions. Using simple symbols and colors, they could show when they were tired, anxious, or happy. The humans responded with gestures, offering comfort when they were afraid and celebrating small victories when they succeeded. A simple smile or nod became a language of trust that neither humans nor visitors had ever known before. Meanwhile, scientists worked tirelessly to interpret the visitor's story. Through a combination of gestures, drawings, and a communication device, they began to understand the journey the visitors had endured. They saw images of planets collapsing, fires consuming lands, and people fleeing in fear. The visitors showed how families and communities had been scattered, some lost forever. They had traveled through space, facing unknown dangers, relying on the ship's failing systems to survive. The humans watching were moved, not just by the facts, but by the emotions behind them. Every step, every struggle, every fearful glance told a story of endurance and hope. As the global debate continued, some members of the public began to take sides. Many ordinary people expressed excitement and support for the visitors. People sent messages online saying that they should be protected, that humanity's greatest strength was its compassion. Schools, universities, and communities started discussions, imagining what it would mean to host beings from another world. At the same time, there were skeptics and critics, people who feared that contact with the unknown could be dangerous. Yet, even the critics could not deny the visitors' vulnerability and need for help. The visitors themselves seemed to notice the shift in energy. They began looking around more, observing the humans who had arrived from outside the shelter. Some visitors reached out with small gestures, as if asking questions about these humans. Were they friendly? Could they be trusted? The humans responded with calm voices, open gestures, and patient demonstrations. Every interaction became an opportunity to teach, to build trust, and to show that not all beings in this world would exploit them. During this time, one of the most remarkable changes occurred in the visitors' behavior. Initially, they had been hesitant to move, to explore, or to touch anything unfamiliar. But as they interacted with humans, curiosity began to take over fear. They started examining small objects, touching tools, and even mimicking simple human actions. A human demonstrated how to pour water from a container, and a visitor copied the movement, spilling a little but laughing in a soft, musical tone. The laughter was contagious. The humans smiled back, realizing that even across worlds, joy could be shared. Humans also started learning from the visitors. Their intelligence was evident in how they solved small problems, shared resources, and organized themselves within the shelter. They had developed ways to survive that humans had never imagined. Their adaptability and careful thinking reminded the humans that intelligence was not limited to one species. There was a mutual exchange happening. Humans provided protection and guidance, and the visitors offered insights into resilience and collaboration. Yet, even with growing trust, moments of fear remained. Loud noises, sudden movements, or unfamiliar objects could make the visitors freeze or retreat. Humans learned to respect these moments, giving them space and time to adjust. Every small victory, every step forward, was a reminder that trust cannot be rushed. Patience, empathy, and understanding became the invisible language that guided both humans and visitors. By the fifth day, a clearer picture of the visitors' past had emerged. They came from a system far away, where life had flourished for generations. Their communities had homes, traditions, and ways of caring for one another. When disaster struck, they were forced to leave everything behind, fleeing into the vast unknown. Earth had not been their destination, but it became their refuge. Accidental, yes, but also a lifeline. Humans listening to this story realized the universality of fear, loss, and hope. These beings were, in many ways, like refugees humans had known on their own planet, people displaced by forces beyond their control, seeking safety and compassion. The media coverage outside the landing site grew, but with it came a sense of responsibility. Many journalists reported the story with care, focusing on the visitors' vulnerability and the humans' efforts to help. They highlighted moments of trust building, small acts of kindness, and the remarkable patience on both sides. The story resonated with people everywhere. It reminded them of the importance of empathy, and the impact of small, thoughtful actions in times of uncertainty. As the week progressed, the visitors became more comfortable with human presence. They moved freely in the shelter, explored the surrounding area under supervision, and even began interacting with the humans in playful ways. One of the humans set up a simple game, a small ball that could roll and bounce. The visitors watched curiously at first, then began rolling it back and forth. Laughter and soft musical tones echoed through the field. It was a simple activity, yet it symbolized a breakthrough, a shared moment of joy between two very different worlds. Human leaders continued to debate, but observing these interactions made a difference. Some who had been fearful began to see that compassion was not weakness. Protecting the visitors did not make humans vulnerable. It revealed strength in understanding, patience, and care. In the quiet moments of observation, it became clear that humanity was being tested, not in its ability to fight or defend, but in its ability to be kind, to build trust, and to recognize shared experiences across the universe. By the end of this period, the relationship between humans and visitors had deepened. Trust had been established, small victories celebrated, and understanding growing. The visitors, though still cautious, were no longer frozen by fear. They had begun to explore, to communicate, and to express emotions in ways that humans could understand. Humans, in turn, had learned lessons about empathy, patience, and the power of small, consistent acts of kindness. For the visitors, Earth had become more than a random landing. It had become a place where hope could exist again, where they could imagine a future, even if uncertain. And for humans, this encounter was more than a scientific curiosity. It was a reminder of what humanity could achieve when fear was set aside and compassion guided action. It was clear to everyone present that the world was entering a new chapter. The arrival of the visitors had sparked debates, inspired curiosity, and challenged assumptions. Yet in the quiet shelter, where humans and visitors shared food, gestures, and games, a deeper truth was emerging. Survival alone was not enough. Understanding, trust, and care were equally vital. And as these two worlds began to learn from each other, something extraordinary was happening. Both humans and visitors were discovering that connection. Empathy and patience could bridge even the vast distances of space. The story of survival had shifted. By the next morning, the atmosphere around the landing site had shifted. The visitors, though still cautious, were showing more confidence. They explored the temporary shelter and the small area around it, stepping carefully over the grass and examining the small structures humans had built. The humans noticed their curiosity and encouraged it gently, making sure nothing was too overwhelming. Each small step the visitors took was a sign that trust was growing. The humans had spent days observing and learning about the visitors' behavior. They realized that understanding emotions mattered as much as understanding facts. The visitors were highly social and highly sensitive to their surroundings. Loud noises, sudden movements, or aggressive gestures would make them freeze or withdraw. On the other hand, calm voices, gentle gestures, and shared meals seemed to give them courage. Recognizing this, the humans worked to create an environment that was not only safe, but also emotionally supportive. Small routines began to form. Visitors and humans would gather each morning to share warmth, water, and food. Visitors slowly learned to use the communication device with more ease, expressing simple needs and even curiosity about the humans' world. The humans, in return, learned to read subtle signs, gestures, body language, and small sounds that indicated how the visitors felt. Every day became a lesson in patience, empathy, and shared understanding. One morning, the visitors pointed at the sky and then at the earth below. They made soft sounds that rose and fell like questions. The humans understood this to mean that they were curious about the world they had landed on. It was their first clear request to explore more. After careful consideration, A small group of humans guided the visitors a short distance from the shelter. They allowed them to see trees, streams, and open fields, showing them the beauty of the planet that was now temporarily their home. The visitors' reactions were remarkable. They moved slowly, touching leaves, brushing fingers through grass, and looking at running water with awe. Some made soft tones that humans recognized as expressions of wonder. Humans realized that this was more than curiosity. It was hope, the first real joy they had seen on the visitors' faces since arrival. In that moment, it became clear that safety alone was not enough. Visitors needed to feel that Earth was a place worth being, a place where they could begin to rebuild a sense of normal life. At the same time, work on their ship continued. Engineers studied its systems, carefully checking what could be repaired and what might be replaced. The ship was sophisticated, but clearly not designed for the long, unplanned journey it had taken. Repairing it would take time, expertise, and resources beyond what was immediately available. Still, the humans prioritized the visitors' well-being over speed. Repairs were slow but steady, and the visitors watched every step with a mixture of fascination and trust. Trust, however, was fragile. Visitors still flinched at sudden movements or loud sounds. One human accidentally dropped a tool nearby, and the visitors froze, huddling together for protection. The humans quickly stepped back and spoke softly, showing that no harm was intended. The visitors gradually relaxed, but the incident reminded everyone that patience and understanding were ongoing needs. Humanity was learning that compassion required constant attention and adaptation, not just a single act. Food continued to be a bridge between worlds. The visitors learned quickly that the humans' offerings were safe and nourishing. They began experimenting, trying different fruits and vegetables, and even tasting simple dishes prepared for them. Watching them eat, the humans felt a deep connection. It was a reminder that basic needs, food, water, rest, were universal, and that care could create trust more powerfully than words ever could. The communication device became a source of learning and connection. Visitors were now able to ask questions about the humans, their world, and the environment around them. One asked about water, pointing at a stream and looking at a human with curiosity. Another pointed at the trees and made a sound that seemed to mean food or shelter. Humans answered with gestures, demonstrations, and careful words, and the visitors responded with understanding. Each interaction deepened the relationship between the two groups. The humans also began introducing small concepts of Earth culture to the visitors. They showed simple tools, how to build temporary structures, and even how to make fire safely. The visitors observed carefully, sometimes mimicking, sometimes asking through gestures. It was clear that they were intelligent learners, capable of understanding not just survival needs, but also ways to interact with the world around them. The humans were amazed at how quickly they adapted to new information, even in an unfamiliar environment. Despite progress, the outside world remained a challenge. Media coverage and public attention continued to grow. Some people were fascinated and supportive, sending messages of encouragement and even donations of supplies. Others were skeptical, expressing fears about the visitors' presence. Some political leaders debated whether the visitors should be relocated, contained, or studied more strictly. The humans working directly with the visitors realized that their decisions could influence global perception. Every action mattered, and they had to act with care. The visitors began showing more emotional range. They laughed softly at small games, played with objects in curious ways, and even imitated some human gestures. One human created a simple rolling ball game, and the visitors began pushing the ball back and forth, laughing in soft, musical tones. It was a breakthrough moment. Play, humans realized, was a powerful tool for trust, connection, and emotional healing. The visitors were learning to feel safe enough to enjoy the moment, and humans were learning that even small joys mattered deeply. Over time, the visitors shared more of their story through gestures, drawings, and the communication device. They described their homeworld in detail, the beauty, the communities, and the culture. They showed the destruction caused by their sun's instability and the chaos that forced them to flee. The humans watched, absorbing not just the facts, but the emotions behind them. They could see fear, sadness, and resilience reflected in the visitors' expressions. Each story built empathy, not just understanding. Even at night, when the visitors rested, humans continued learning. They observed breathing patterns, subtle movements, and social interactions within the group. Visitors comforted each other when distressed, shared warmth, and looked out for the younger ones. The humans saw that their care for each other mirrored the trust they were beginning to show toward humans. It was a reminder that compassion was universal, and that empathy could bridge even the widest gaps. By the end of this period, the humans had made a decision. They would protect the visitors not just temporarily, but for as long as it took to help them feel safe and supported. The decision was not without risk. There were still questions about long-term solutions, the potential reactions of other nations, and how to balance curiosity with responsibility. But watching the visitors grow, laugh, and interact had made the choice simple in human hearts. Compassion outweighed fear. Visitors, in turn, were responding. Their trust had grown, and they were more willing to interact with humans, explore the area, and engage in small activities. Their eyes reflected curiosity and even joy, and they seemed to understand that humans were committed to their well-being. For the first time, hope shone clearly on their faces. They had survived, yes, but now they were beginning to feel that Earth could be a place where life might flourish again, even if far from their original home. Small routines strengthened this bond. Meals were shared, activities were conducted, and time was spent simply observing and learning. Visitors began anticipating human gestures, understanding routines, and even initiating small actions themselves. The humans realized that they had become partners in this new chapter of life for the visitors. The relationship was no longer one-sided. Trust, understanding, and care were mutual. At the same time, humans were aware that this was just the beginning. The visitors' journey was far from over. Their ship still needed repair, their long-term. Safety had to be considered, and their adaptation to Earth's environment would take months. But the foundation had been laid. Trust, patience, and empathy had created a bridge between worlds. Both humans and visitors had learned that connection was possible, even across unimaginable distances. By the end of these days, the bond between the humans and the visitors was undeniable. They were no longer strangers observing each other cautiously. They had begun to form a small, fragile community where understanding, care, and empathy guided actions. Visitors had started to smile, laugh, and interact. Humans had learned patience, humility, and the power of simple gestures. It was a turning point, though quiet and gradual. Fear had not disappeared entirely, but it had been replaced by cautious hope. Trust had taken root. Small acts of care had built strong bonds, and both worlds were beginning to imagine a future together. The visitors, though far from home, were beginning to feel that Earth could be a place of safety, understanding, and even happiness. And for humans, the experience was teaching a lesson about compassion that no other event could have provided. That reaching out, patiently and gently, could create connections strong enough to bridge even the stars. Life around the landing site had started to feel calmer, but that calm was fragile. Humans and visitors had grown used to each other's presence. Visitors were beginning to explore, interact, and even play. Humans were learning patience, empathy, and how to communicate without words. The small community that had formed felt like a safe bubble, a temporary sanctuary, far from the rest of the world's attention. But one morning, a new signal appeared on Earth's monitoring systems. At first, It was faint, almost like a distant echo, but it quickly grew stronger. Experts studied it carefully. It didn't resemble anything known. Not a natural phenomenon, not a satellite, not an asteroid. It was intelligent, moving in a deliberate way. Alarm spread among the humans who had been overseeing the visitors. They quickly realized that it might be a vessel, something or someone following the visitors' trail. The visitors noticed it too. They paused, looking at the sky with wide, tense eyes. They made soft tones, some anxious, some pleading. Their gestures were clear. They wanted to understand, and they seemed to hope that the humans would protect them. The humans, watching closely, understood that this was more than curiosity. The visitors were scared. They had survived disaster once, and now a potential threat was appearing again. Human leaders faced a choice. Some suggested withdrawing from contact, keeping a safe distance, and letting the visitors fend for themselves. Others argued that compassion demanded action. These beings had come to Earth by mistake. They were tired, weak, and had no defenses. Humanity had an opportunity to show its greatest strength, not through weapons, but through protection and care. The decision was made. The visitors would be shielded. No matter the cost. In preparation, humans worked quickly. Communication with the visitors became more urgent. The visitors needed reassurance, a clear sense that humans would not abandon them. Gentle gestures, calm tones, and repeated demonstrations of safety became their priority. Every human interaction was deliberate, every movement considered. They could not allow fear or uncertainty to take root in the visitors again. At the same time, scientists studied the approaching signal. It was far, but moving closer at an alarming speed. Its technology was unknown. For the first time, some humans felt fear themselves, realizing that even a peaceful mission could have consequences if they were unprepared. Defense measures were planned, not to attack, but to protect. Shielding the visitors became the focus. Back at the shelter, the visitors' behavior shifted noticeably. They huddled together more closely, making soft, rapid tones that humans interpreted as concern. They pointed at the sky, then at the humans, seemingly asking, "Will you protect us?" Humans reassured them with calm gestures, open hands, and steady voices. Slowly, some visitors relaxed, trusting the humans to act on their behalf. While waiting for the unknown vessel to approach, humans worked to strengthen trust in other ways. They allowed the visitors to explore safely within the area, set up small activities, and even created games to distract them from fear. A simple ball-rolling activity, small puzzles, and even shared meals became ways to maintain calm and foster confidence. Each action was deliberate, showing the visitors that humans were consistent, dependable, and protective. As the unknown signal drew closer, humans began to notice subtle changes in the visitors. Some became quieter, scanning the sky, watching for movement. Others tried to prepare small items or gestures, perhaps instinctively trying to protect or warn. Humans realized that even with trust established, past experiences of loss and danger had left deep marks. Patience was again the key. There could be no rush, only careful guidance. In the command centers, experts monitored the approaching vessel carefully. It did not show signs of aggression at first, but its presence alone suggested that the visitors were being pursued. Plans were made to communicate, not fight. The goal was to prevent harm without escalating the situation. Every human involved understood that the safety of the visitors was the highest priority. Meanwhile, humans continued teaching the visitors about Earth. They pointed out safe areas, demonstrated how to use water, and showed small structures that could provide shelter. The visitors absorbed this information eagerly, understanding that safety here was a shared responsibility. Humans and visitors were learning together, cooperating in ways that reflected trust and hope. One day, the visitors made a clear attempt to communicate more complex ideas. They drew images on their device of other beings, ones they seemed afraid of. Humans recognized the urgency. These drawings likely represented those who had followed them through space. The realization deepened their resolve. They would not allow fear to overwhelm the visitors. Every measure of protection, every step of guidance, had to be precise and careful. As the unknown vessel drew closer, humans began setting up controlled demonstrations of readiness. They did not want to provoke aggression, but they wanted to show that Earth would not allow harm to come to those who sought refuge. Defense systems were tested quietly, communication channels monitored, and small patrols established, all with the aim of providing a visible sense of security for the visitors. The visitors watched these preparations. Some seemed tense, unsure of what was happening, while others relied on the humans for reassurance. Every gesture mattered. A calm voice, a protective stance, and gentle guidance helped them understand that humans were allies, not threats. This reinforced the bond that had been forming since the landing. At the same time, humans worked on long-term solutions. Temporary shelters were reinforced, supplies were stocked, and communication devices were improved. The visitors began to adapt, learning routines and procedures that kept them safe. They even began to show small signs of confidence, standing a little taller, exploring slightly further, and interacting more freely with humans. Each step forward was a sign of progress and hope. Then the moment came. The vessel appeared in the distance, large and unfamiliar. Humans and visitors alike watched in silence. Fear and uncertainty were present, but so was determination. Humans had prepared carefully, ensuring that protective measures were in place while showing no hostility. The visitors huddled together, watching, waiting for humans to lead. Communication attempts were made. Earth sent signals, using light patterns and sounds, indicating peaceful intentions. The vessel paused, responding with signals of its own. For a tense few moments, nothing moved. Then, slowly, the vessel changed course slightly, avoiding direct confrontation. The visitors relaxed somewhat, realizing that humans had managed to prevent immediate danger. It was a profound moment. The visitors had survived another potential threat, but not through fear or aggression. They had survived through trust in the humans, through the humans' patience, care, and determination to protect. The bond that had formed was now undeniable. Humans and visitors had become partners in survival, learning from each other and working together to face the unknown. After the vessel retreated slightly, humans guided the visitors back to the shelter. They reassured them with calm gestures, soft tones, and shared activities. The visitors responded with gratitude, soft musical tones, and gentle touches. Trust had been tested, but it had held. For the first time, the visitors could begin to relax fully, knowing that humans would act to keep them safe. Over the following days, humans focused on rebuilding a sense of stability. They allowed the visitors to continue exploring, learning, and playing. Small victories, such as sharing a meal, completing a game, or successfully navigating a new area, became celebrated moments. Each day reinforced the bond, showing the visitors that Earth could be a sanctuary. Even amidst uncertainty. This period was not easy. The threat of unknown forces reminded humans that vigilance was necessary. But it also taught them an important lesson. Protection was more than technology or power. True protection came from care, patience, and understanding. By combining preparation with compassion, humans had shown that safety could coexist with trust. Visitors began to trust the humans more fully. They followed guidance, explored with confidence, and expressed curiosity about the world around them. They even began to interact with humans in playful ways again, showing laughter, curiosity, and joy. Humans observed these moments carefully, understanding that every small sign of trust was hard-won and deeply meaningful. The bond between humans and visitors had grown stronger than anyone had anticipated. Fear was still present, but it had been replaced by hope. Trust had been established and tested. The visitors now understood that humans were allies, capable of protection and compassion. Humans, in turn, had learned that empathy and patience could create bonds strong enough to overcome fear and uncertainty. By the end of this period, it was clear that the visitors had survived not only physically but emotionally. They had found safety, understanding, and care. And humans had discovered something equally profound, that protection, trust, and compassion were inseparable. Survival was no longer just about endurance. It was about connection, understanding, and partnership. The experience left both humans and visitors forever changed. The unknown vessel that had approached represented a challenge, but it had also demonstrated the strength of trust and care. And as humans and visitors prepared for whatever came next, they did so together, stronger for the bond they had built, and ready to face the future. The days had passed, and the visitors had settled into a routine. Their initial fear had lessened, replaced by cautious curiosity. They moved through the small area around the shelter, explored the fields, touched the grass and trees, and watched streams flow gently past. Humans watched them closely, making sure they remained safe, offering guidance, and silently celebrating each moment of confidence the visitors displayed. The humans realized something remarkable. The visitors were not just survivors, they were learners. They absorbed information quickly, adapted to the environment, and began to interact with humans in ways that went beyond simple gestures. They explored objects, imitated movements, and even created small patterns on the communication device to express ideas and questions. Every day, the bond between humans and visitors grew stronger. There were still moments of tension. Loud noises, sudden shadows, or unexpected movements could make the visitors flinch or huddle together. Humans learned to anticipate these reactions, speaking softly, making gentle gestures, and creating an environment that was predictable and safe. The visitors began to understand these patterns too. They learned when they could move freely, when to wait, and when humans would act to protect them. It was a shared understanding, slowly building a bridge between worlds. One morning, humans decided to take the visitors a little further from the shelter. They wanted to show them more of its forests, streams, and open spaces. The visitors hesitated at first, unsure if it was safe, but humans led the way patiently, step by step. The visitors touched leaves, bent down to observe small insects, and even dipped their hands into the cool stream. Their reactions were a mix of awe, curiosity, and quiet joy. Humans realized that this moment exploring, learning, and discovering was as important as any shelter or meal. While exploring, humans began teaching the visitors about small survival skills. They demonstrated how to use tools safely, how to carry water, and how to make temporary shelters. The visitors watched carefully, imitating movements and asking questions through the communication device. One visitor pointed to a tree and made soft tones, then pointed to a human, indicating a question about the tree. Humans responded patiently, showing how to identify branches and leaves, how to gather materials safely. The visitors' faces lit up with understanding and excitement. At the same time, humans continued repairing the visitors' ship. It was slow work, requiring precision and care. Engineers examined the systems, replaced damaged components, and ensured that life support mechanisms functioned reliably. The visitors watched these repairs with fascination, pointing, touching, and making soft tones that seemed to express both curiosity and gratitude. Humans understood that this ship was more than transportation. It was their connection to survival, and the visitors' trust in them was deepened by the care given to their vessel. Communication continued to improve. The visitors began expressing more complex ideas through the device. They drew pictures of stars, planets, and other beings, showing humans fragments of their world and history. Humans listened, asked questions, and demonstrated understanding through gestures and images. Each interaction was a lesson in patience, empathy, and observation. Slowly, humans began to feel they were learning as much from the visitors as the visitors were learning from them. The bond between humans and visitors became even more evident during meals. Visitors had learned to accept food confidently and even began sharing small gestures of gratitude. They would touch the hands of humans who offered food or make soft tones that humans recognized as thank you. It was a language beyond words, a simple, human-centric expression of trust, connection, and care. Each shared meal reinforced the fragile, growing community. One day, while exploring a small grove near the shelter, visitors discovered something remarkable. They pointed at birds in the trees, watching them with curiosity. Some made soft, excited tones, trying to communicate their wonder. Humans explained, through gestures and drawings, that these creatures were part of Earth, living freely and not dangerous. The visitors observed quietly, their large eyes reflecting fascination and joy. Humans realized that this moment, witnessing curiosity, wonder, and trust, was a turning point. The visitors were not just surviving. They were beginning to live, to feel joy again. As the week progressed, humans introduced small games and exercises to teach coordination and problem-solving. Rolling a ball, arranging objects in patterns, or simple navigation exercises became tools to build confidence. Visitors participated eagerly, laughing softly and making musical tones of enjoyment. Humans smiled, realizing that play was a powerful bridge between worlds, teaching trust, patience, and cooperation without needing words. Meanwhile, outside the shelter, the world had begun to react differently. News of the visitors' arrival, their peaceful behavior, and the care humans provided spread quickly. Many people expressed wonder and support. Schools, universities, and communities discussed the lessons of trust, patience, and empathy. Public opinion shifted toward understanding rather than fear. It was a reminder to the humans working directly with the visitors that their actions had consequences far beyond the shelter. Their patience, care, and compassion were influencing the entire planet. Visitors themselves began experimenting with small interactions. They imitated humans' gestures, tried to replicate tools, and even began marking small patterns on the ground. One visitor carefully traced lines in the dirt, and a human followed, demonstrating the pattern with gestures and patience. The visitors watched closely, learning not just skills, but also the principles of cooperation and shared understanding. Each small success reinforced trust, showing that connection could grow stronger with effort, care, and consistency. At night, visitors and humans would gather near the shelter. Humans taught them about the stars, pointing to constellations, explaining the cycles of day and night, and showing how Earth moved in space. Visitors listened carefully, making soft tones that expressed awe and curiosity. They pointed at stars, then at themselves, indicating questions about their place in the universe. Humans responded with patience, gestures, and simple drawings, bridging the gap between worlds with understanding. Despite their progress, the visitors occasionally showed signs of fatigue or anxiety. Humans learned to recognize these moments and respond gently. They would guide the visitors back to the shelter, offer warmth, soft tones, and rest. Visitors began to rely on humans not only for physical safety, but also for emotional reassurance. The humans realized that trust was not just about survival. It was about creating a stable environment where fear could fade and hope could grow. One of the most significant breakthroughs came when the visitors began to show affection for humans in subtle ways. They would touch hands softly, nuzzle gently, or make musical tones that humans interpreted as appreciation. These moments were small but profound. They were evidence of a deep connection, a mutual understanding that transcended language or species. Humans felt the same in return, realizing that compassion and care could bridge even the greatest divides. Humans also worked to prepare the visitors for a possible return journey or for integration into Earth if needed. They taught them about plants, animals, and basic survival skills. Visitors watched attentively, imitating movements, asking questions through gestures, and showing remarkable intelligence and adaptability. Each lesson reinforced the growing partnership between the two worlds. By the end of this period, the bond between humans and visitors was undeniable. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown together. They had survived, adapted, and learned to trust. Visitors had found a safe place, a sense of community, and a renewed hope for the future. Humans had learned patience, empathy, and the power of small acts of kindness. Both sides had grown stronger, not through dominance or control, but through understanding, trust, and care. The final day arrived quietly. The visitors gathered near the shelter, looking out at the world they had accidentally landed on. They made soft tones, pointed at humans, and touched small objects, expressing emotions that humans could finally understand as gratitude, relief, and hope. Humans responded with calm gestures, soft tones, and gentle touches. In that quiet moment, the fragile bubble of trust, care, and connection reached its fullest expression. The story that had begun with fear and uncertainty ended with understanding and hope. Visitors had come to Earth by mistake, weak and unsure. Humans had chosen to protect, guide, and care for them, not with force, but with patience, empathy, and compassion. Together, they had faced challenges, learned from one another, and built a bridge between worlds. In the days that followed, humans continued to provide care while preparing for the visitors' future. Some visitors would eventually learn to navigate Earth's environment more independently. Others might return to the stars, carrying the lessons of trust, care, and compassion wherever they went. But one thing was certain: the bond formed in those first days and weeks would never be forgotten. Both humans and visitors had experienced something profound. It was more than survival. It was connection. It was understanding. It was hope. And in a quiet field on Earth, under the stars, humans and visitors alike looked up at the sky, knowing that despite the vast distances between worlds, trust and compassion could bridge Eve.